The dust on the mining colony of Oraxus IV didn't just coat your boots, it worked its way into the seams of your soul. It was a red, iron-heavy grit that tasted like old blood and rusted machinery. The kind of dust that you could never quite wash off, no matter how hard you scrubbed. It settled in the creases of your face and the action of your rifle. Ronin sat on a reinforced shipping crate outside the supply depot, watching the twin suns dip below the jagged horizon. He didn't move, he didn't check a data pad. He simply sat, his hands resting on his knees, still as a statue in a graveyard. He was a man built of sharp angles and scar tissue, wearing a heavy canvas coat that had seen more winters than most of the locals had seen birthdays. His hair was the color of steel wool, cropped close, practical. He wasn't here for trouble. He was here for fuel couplings, hydraulic fluid, and fresh water. But on the frontier, trouble has a way of finding the man who tries hardest to ignore it. He lifted a tin cup to his lips. The coffee was black, thick, and tasted faintly of the iodine tablets used to purify the local water. It was terrible, but it was hot, and that was enough. Ronin's eyes, pale blue and surrounded by a map of crow's feet, scanned the thoroughfare. To a casual observer, he looked like he was resting. To a professional, he was establishing a perimeter. He noted the wind speed by the drift of the steam from the refinery vents. He noted the sight lines from the rooftops. He noted the structural integrity of the cover nearby. It wasn't paranoia, it was habit. It was 40 years of staying alive in places where life was cheap. Across the muddy thoroughfare, a commotion broke the heavy silence of the evening. It wasn't the usual drunken brawl of miners blowing off steam after a 12-hour shift. This was sharper, meaner, the sound of cruelty enjoying itself. Ronin didn't turn his head, but his eyes shifted, narrowing beneath the brim of his battered hat. He saw them, 3 Velari enforcers. They were hulking, violet-skinned brutes standing nearly 7 feet tall, with natural chitinous plating on their shoulders that looked like armor, but grew out of their bones. They wore the mismatched gear of mercenaries, low-slung energy repeaters on their hips, serrated knives, and the arrogance that comes from never having been told no. They were the law here, which meant there was no law at all. They had a girl cornered against the corrugated metal wall of the refinery. She couldn't have been more than 20 in human years, though her species aged differently. She was pale, her skin possessing a faint bioluminescent quality that seemed terrified to shine in the gloom. Her large dark eyes were wide with a terror that transcended language. She was hugging a small ragged bundle to her chest, trembling so violently that Ronin could see the vibrations from 40 yards away. One of the Velari, the leader by the look of the gold braid pinned haphazardly to his shoulder, stepped forward. He said something in his native tongue, a guttural clicking language that sounded like rocks grinding together, and backhanded her. It wasn't a killing blow, it was a corrective one, a blow meant to humiliate. The girl crumpled to the red dirt, making a sound that was too high, too thin to be heard over the wind. The Velari laughed. It was a wet, grinding sound deep in their chests. Ronin sighed. It was a deep exhalation, the sound of a man who had hoped, against all experience, that the universe might just let him finish his coffee in peace. He looked at the cup, half full. He tipped it out onto the dust. A waste of coffee, but he wouldn't be drinking it now. He stood up, his joints didn't pop. He didn't stretch. He simply transitioned from seated to standing with the fluid, dangerous economy of a predatory animal that had decided the time for resting was over. He adjusted his belt. The heavy revolver, a projectile weapon, an antique by galactic standards but reliable as gravity, sat high on his right hip. The leather of the holster was worn smooth, shaped perfectly to the gun. He began to walk. He didn't run. Running implies panic. Running implies you are reacting to the situation. Ronin walked with a heavy, rhythmic cadence. Hail to, hail to! The sound of his boots on the hardpack was distinct. It was a measured beat that cut through the laughter of the Velari. The leader turned, his 4 eyes narrowing as he processed the approaching figure. He saw a human, older, unarmored. To the alien eye, he looked like prey. He looked like something that had been left behind by the tide. Lost, old man, the Velari grunted. His translator collar spat out the words in a flat, synthesized monotone that stripped the insult of its emotion, but left the threat intact. Ronin didn't stop until he was 10 feet away. This was the engagement distance, close enough to smell the ozone coming off their weapons and the sour chemical reek of their sweat, close enough to see the dilated pupils of the girl on the ground. You're blocking the road, Ronin said. His voice was gravel rolling inside a cement mixer, low resonant. It wasn't a question, it was a statement of fact. The Valari leader scoffed, stepping away from the girl to loom over the human. He outweighed Ronin by 200 pounds of muscle and exoskeleton. He cast a shadow that swallowed the human whole. "The road is wherever I say it is, human," the Valari sneered, his hand resting casually on the shock baton at his belt. "Go back to your ship before I decide to paint this dirt with your fluids." Ronin looked at the alien. He didn't look at the face. He looked at the neck, where the heavy chitinous plates had a soft, fleshy gap to allow for head movement. He looked at the holster on the alien's hip, noting the retention strap was undone, sloppy, undisciplined. He looked at the other two guards. One was lighting a smoke stick, his rifle slung over his shoulder, barrel pointing at the dirt. The other was laughing, watching the girl. Amateurs. Dangerous amateurs, but amateurs nonetheless. "I'm going to ask you one time," Ronin said, his hands hanging loose by his sides, his fingers relaxed. "Step away from the girl." The Valari laughed again. "Or what? You'll die of old age at me?" The alien raised his arm, the shock baton crackling with blue electricity. It was a telegraphed move, slow, arrogant, the move of a bully who has never been punched back. The violence, when it came, was not cinematic. It was ugly, abrupt, and professional. Ronin didn't go for his gun, not yet. He stepped inside the alien's guard, his left hand snapping out to catch the descending wrist. He didn't just block it. He redirected the kinetic energy, twisting his hips and driving his right palm upward into the alien's chin. There was a sickening, dry crack as the jawbone shattered. The force of the blow, driven by leverage and grounded mechanics rather than brute strength, shut the alien's lights out instantly. The leader dropped like a sack of wet cement, his shock baton clattering uselessly to the stones. Before the body hit the ground, Ronin had pivoted. The second guard, the smoker, was fumbling for his rifle. He was panicked, his hands shaking. Ronin drew. The motion was a blur, a muscle memory burned into his neural pathways decades ago in wars that history books had already rewritten. The revolver barked once. It was a thunderclap in the quiet street. A .44 caliber slug, heavy lead, no energy shielding, no fancy tracking guidance, just physics. It hit the second guard in the shoulder joint, shattering the connection between arm and torso, spinning him around and dropping him to his knees. He screamed, a high-pitched keen that grated on the ears. The third guard froze. He had his weapon halfway up, but he stopped. He found himself looking down the barrel of a weapon that smelled of sulfur and ancient chemistry. He looked at Ronin's eyes. There was no anger there. There was no adrenaline-fueled rage. There was only a cold, mathematical calculation. The guard realized, with a clarity that only comes near death, that the human wasn't threatening him. The human was simply waiting for an excuse. "Walk away," Ronin said. He didn't shout. He didn't sound intense. He sounded bored. He sounded like a man telling a dog to get off the porch. The third guard looked at his fallen leader, looked at the smoking barrel, and made the only intelligent decision of his life. He backed away, hands raised, and then turned and ran, his boots kicking up red dust as he fled toward the garrison. Ronin held the aim for 3 seconds, ensuring the threat was routed. He didn't lower the weapon immediately. He scanned the rooftops again. Clear. He scanned the alleyway. Clear. Slowly, deliberately, he holstered the weapon. He snapped the retention strap closed. He turned to the girl. She was curled into a ball, her hands over her head, bracing for the impact. She had seen violence all her life. She knew the rhythm of it. The big man hits the little man, then turns his rage on the victim. It was the law of the strong on Oraxus IV. She squeezed her eyes shut, holding her breath, waiting for the boot, the fist, the pain. She felt a weight settle on her head. It wasn't a strike. It was heavy, warm, and firm. A hand rough with calluses, smelling of gun oil and tobacco. She flinched violently, a reflex born of trauma. But the hand didn't grab. It didn't strike, it patted her twice. A rhythmic, solid, dull thud against her skull. "You're safe now," a voice rumbled from above. It wasn't soft, Ronin didn't do soft, but it was steady. It was the voice of a man who stated facts, not wishes. It was the voice of a structural beam holding up a collapsing roof. She opened her eyes slowly. The human was towering over her, blocking out the harsh light of the setting suns. He wasn't looking at her. He was scanning the perimeter, his eyes constantly moving. He reached down with his free hand. "Up, we're moving." She took his hand, it swallowed hers. He pulled her to her feet with no effort, as if she weighed nothing more than a backpack. "My name is Elara," she whispered, her voice trembling. Ronin didn't look at her. He adjusted the collar of his coat against the rising wind, "Ronin," he replied, "come on. Those two will be back and they'll bring friends. And I hate uninvited guests." They walked in silence to the edge of the settlement. Ronin didn't offer comforting platitudes. He didn't ask her if she was okay. He assessed her gait. She was limping slightly, favoring her left leg. Dehydrated, malnourished. But she kept up, that was good. That counted for something. "Here," he said, pulling a canteen from his belt and tossing it to her. "Drink. Don't gulp, sip. You'll make yourself sick if you rush it." She did as she was told. The water was lukewarm and tasted metallic, but it was the best thing she had ever had. She watched him as they walked. He moved like the older soldiers she had read about in the archives of the Great War, before the corporations took over. Efficient, no wasted energy. He checked every corner before turning. He kept his body between her and the open road. He was a walking shield. They reached his ship, the Iron Mule. It was a battered hauler that looked like a flying brick. It wasn't pretty. The paint was scoured off by atmospheric re-entries, leaving bare, pitted gray metal. But the hull plating was thick, and the landing struts looked like they could support a building. It sat on the landing pad like a stubborn beast of burden. He cycled the airlock. The hydraulics hissed and groaned, a sound like an old man getting out of a chair. "Strap in," he commanded, pointing to the co-pilot's seat as they entered the cramped utilitarian bridge. "We're leaving orbit." As the ship shuddered and lifted off, punching through the atmosphere with a roar that rattled her teeth, Elara looked at the man beside her. His face was illuminated by the amber glow of the dashboard lights, etching deep shadows into the lines around his mouth and eyes. He worked the controls with a familiarity that spoke of decades of flight. He didn't look at the switches, his hands just knew where they were. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the engine thrusters. "Why did you help me? You don't know me." "You fought the Valari for a stranger." Ronin checked the navigation array, his fingers dancing over the tactile switches. He engaged the artificial gravity stabilizers. "Didn't seem right," he said. That was it, no philosophy. No moral grandstanding about the rights of sentient beings. Just a simple assessment of the situation. A man sees something broken, he fixes it. A man sees something wrong, he corrects it. It was an old code. A code from a time when men were measured by their actions, not their intentions. They spent the next 3 days in the void, traveling through the shipping lanes to avoid the main patrols. Ronin was a man of routine. He woke at 500 ship time. He exercised, push-ups, sit-ups, working a heavy bag hung in the cargo hold until he sweat. He cleaned his weapons, disassembling them down to the pins and springs, oiling them and reassembling them blindfolded. He ate his rations standing up at the galley counter. Elara tried to make herself useful. She cleaned the mess hall. She organized the cargo bay. She watched him. She was trying to understand the creature that had saved her. "You were a soldier," she said on the second night. It wasn't a question. They were eating stew out of tin packets. The ship hummed around them, a constant, comforting vibration. Ronin paused, his spoon halfway to his mouth. He looked at the bulkhead, as if seeing through the metal to the cold stars beyond. "A long time ago," he said. "What army?" "The only one that mattered at the time." He went back to eating. He wasn't being rude. He just didn't see the utility in dragging up the past. The past was a country he had burned down a long time ago, and he had no desire to sift through the ashes. "The Valari, they are looking for me," Elara said quietly. She put her spoon down. "They won't stop." Ronin looked up. His face was impassive, I figured. You don't send a squad leader to shake down a beggar on a mining rock. That gold braid on his shoulder meant he was royal guard. He leaned back in his chair, the metal creaking under his weight. "You want to tell me why, or do I have to guess?" Elara looked down at her hands. They were small, pale, trembling slightly. "My father, he was a geneticist for the High Council. He discovered something he wasn't supposed to. He encrypted a code into my DNA, a sequence for a terraforming virus. It can turn a dead world into a paradise, or a living world into a graveyard." Ronin nodded slowly. He didn't look surprised. He had seen enough of the galaxy to know that everyone wanted a weapon, and nobody cared who they had to butcher to get it. "The Valari want to extract it," she continued. "To weaponize it, but the extraction process, it kills the host. So you're a walking bomb," he said, in a manner of speaking. Ronin took a sip of his coffee. "Well, that complicates the retirement plan." The proximity alarm screamed. It wasn't a polite beep, it was a klaxon, harsh and demanding, designed to wake the dead. Ronin was out of his chair before the first echo faded. He hit the bridge in 3 strides, moving with a speed that belied his age. The radar screen was a mess of red dots. 3 interceptors, he said, his voice flat, analyzing the data. Fast movers, Valeri markings. They tracked the ion trail, careless of me. Elara ran onto the bridge, clutching the back of his chair, her knuckles white. What do we do? Ronin strapped himself in. He pulled the 5-point harness tight. Sit down, strap in. Don't scream, it distracts me. The iron mule wasn't built for dogfighting. It was a brick with engines. It was built to haul tungsten and lead, not to dance with interceptors. But Ronin knew the ship. He knew every bolt, every weld, every vibration. He knew she was stubborn. Shields up, he muttered, flipping a bank of toggle switches. Divert auxiliary power to the rear deflectors. The ship shuddered violently as the first volley of plasma fire raked the hull. The sound was like hail on a tin roof, magnified 1,000 times. The lights flickered. They're faster than us, Elara cried out, staring at the rear monitor. The Valeri ships were sleek silver darts, closing the distance rapidly. Speed isn't everything, Ronin grunted. Geometry counts. He didn't try to outrun them. That was a losing game. Instead, he watched the range counter. 3,000 kilometers. 2,000, hold on, he said. He cut the main engines. The sudden loss of thrust threw them forward against their straps. The mule drifted, continuing its forward momentum but silent. The Valeri ships overshot, their sensors confused by the sudden drop in energy signature. Ronin flipped the vessel on its axis using the maneuvering thrusters. Now the mule was flying backward, its nose facing the pursuing ships. Main burn, Ronin said and punched the throttle. The engines roared to life, pushing the ship backward, slowing its drift and turning it into a stationary firing platform. Gunnery control is manual, Ronin muttered. Just the way I like it. He grabbed the gunnery yoke. The mule's main weapon wasn't a laser. Lasers diffracted over distance. Lasers lost power. Ronin didn't like lasers. The mule mounted a railgun, a magnetic accelerator that fired a 20-pound tungsten slug at a fraction of the speed of light. Physics is a cruel mistress. The slug didn't burn, it smashed. It didn't care about energy shields. It cared about kinetic energy transfer. Ronin lined up the reticle. He breathed out. He squeezed the trigger. Thud. The entire ship rang like a bell. The recoil was massive, handled by the dampeners but still felt in the marrow of their bones. The slug crossed the vacuum in silence. It caught the lead fighter center mass. There was no fiery Hollywood explosion. There was just a sudden, violent cloud of debris where a ship used to be. The kinetic impact vaporized the fighter instantly. The other 2 fighters broke hard, peeling off to the left and right. They hadn't expected the heavy freighter to bite back. 1 down, Ronin said, 2 to go. But they won't make the same mistake twice, we're going to ground. He flipped the ship again, diving toward the atmosphere of a nearby moon, a gray cratered rock called Tantalus. We can't land there, Elara shouted. There's no atmosphere, no port. I didn't say we were landing at a port, Ronin replied, wrestling with the yoke as the ship hit the upper atmosphere. The turbulence was brutal, we're disappearing. They crash-landed in a canyon system on the dark side of Tantalus. It wasn't a crash exactly. It was an aggressive landing. The landing struts groaned. Metal shrieked like a dying banshee, and the ship skidded for half a mile through gray dust and rocks before coming to a halt against a canyon wall. The silence that followed was ringing. Ronin unbuckled, he checked himself. Bruises, yes, broken bones, no. He turned to Elara. She was pale, shaking, but alive. Check the seals, he ordered. Atmosphere is breathable but thin. 0.6 standard pressure. Get your coat. It's going to be cold. He moved to the weapons locker at the back of the bridge. He keyed in the code. The door hissed open. This time he didn't take the revolver. He reached past it and pulled out a pulse rifle. It was old, scarred, with a heavy wooden stock and a long heat-shrouded barrel. No scope, just iron sights. He grabbed a bandolier of charge packs and slung it over his shoulder. He shoved a combat knife into his boot. They saw us go down, Elara said, her voice shaking as she pulled her coat tight. They'll be coming to finish it. Ronin checked the action on the rifle. Click-clack, a sound of finality. Let 'em come, he said. This is a box canyon, one way in. That makes it a kill zone. He looked at her. For the first time, his expression softened just a fraction. It wasn't a smile. Ronin didn't smile when there was work to be done, but it was a look of recognition. He saw her fear and he saw her mastering it. Listen to me, he said, stepping closer. He loomed over her, solid as the hull of the ship. Fear is a reaction. Biology. You can't stop it, but courage is a decision. You make the decision to act. He reached out and patted her shoulder. A heavy, grounding touch. Stay in the ship. Keep the airlock cycled shut. Do not open it unless you hear my voice or a rescue code. If I don't come back in an hour, you trigger the distress beacon and pray a patrol cruiser is in the sector. Where are you going? She asked. Ronin walked to the airlock. To do my job, I need to explain the property rights of this canyon to our guests. He hiked up the ridge. The gravity was light, making him feel younger, lighter. He moved with the ease of a mountain goat, finding footholds in the crumbling gray rock. He found a position among the boulders, a sniper's nest that offered a clear line of sight down the valley floor, the only approach to the downed ship. He settled in. He adjusted his coat to pat his elbows. He laid the rifle forend on a rock. He controlled his breathing. In, hold, out, pause. The discipline of the sniper. The patience of the hunter. The Volari landed their dropship 2 miles out. They were cautious now. They knew the prey had teeth. They deployed a squad. 10 infantry standard dispersion. They moved well, bounding from cover to cover, but they were used to technology doing the work for them. They relied on their helmet sensors, their motion trackers. Ronin relied on his eyes. He relied on the wind. He waited until they were in the open. A stretch of flat gray dust with no cover, 100 yards. A long shot for iron sights, but Ronin knew his weapon. He knew the drop, he knew the windage. He squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against his shoulder. A blue bolt of ionized energy crossed the valley in an instant. The point man dropped, a hole burned through his chest plate. The squad scattered, diving for rocks that weren't there. Ronin worked the bolt, click-clack. Shot, drop. Another Volari fell. He was a machine. There was no joy in it, no anger. Just the mechanical application of force to solve a problem. Target breath. Squeeze cycle. They pinned him down eventually. It was inevitable. 10 against 1 is simple math, and math always wins in the end. Plasma fire began to chew up the rocks around him. Stone splinters cut his cheek. The air smelled of ozone and burnt rock. He was out of ammo for the rifle. He checked the charge pack, dead. He tossed it aside and drew the revolver. They were close now, 50 yards. He could hear them shouting commands, confident now that the sniper fire had ceased. "Flank him! Rush the ridge!" Ronin checked the cylinder. 6 shots, 7 enemies left. Mathematics, he muttered, wiping blood from his cheek. Always a problem. He stood up. He didn't hide. He stood up behind the ridge, silhouetted against the gray sky, his coat flapping in the thin wind. The Volari paused. They hadn't expected the prey to present itself. They expected him to cower. Ronin raised the revolver. He fired. He fanned the hammer like a gunslinger from the ancient vids. Boom, boom, boom. 3 shots. 3 Volari went down, armor shattered by heavy lead. The rest hesitated. In that moment of hesitation, a roar filled the canyon. A deep mechanical bellow that shook the ground. Ronin didn't turn. He knew that sound. The iron mule Elara. She had fired up the thrusters. She wasn't flying it. She couldn't take off with the damaged struts. She was hovering it. She was dragging the belly of the ship across the rocks, using the vessel itself as a massive battering ram. The ship's retro thrusters kicked up a storm of blinding, choking dust. The Volari were blinded. Their sensors flared whiteout. They screamed in confusion. Ronin didn't waste the moment. He reloaded. 1 shell at a time, calm, steady. He moved into the dust. The gunshots that followed were rhythmic. Controlled boom, boom, boom. When the dust settled, the silence returned to Tantalus. The wind swept the gray powder away, revealing the scene. Ronin was the only thing standing. He walked back to the ship. The iron mule was hovering 3 feet off the ground, the engines whining in protest. Elara lowered the ramp. She was standing at the top, pale, clutching the door frame like a lifeline. I didn't wait, she stammered as he walked up the ramp. You said stay in the ship. But I saw them flanking. Ronin stopped. He wiped a smear of blue blood from his coat. He looked at her. He looked at the ship, battered, smoking, smelling of overheated hydraulics. He looked back at her. A corner of his mouth twitched. It might have been a smile. It might have been a grimace of pain. Disobeying orders, he grunted. Good initiative. Terrible flying, but good initiative. He holstered his gun. We need to clear the system before their heavy cruiser gets a lock on the energy signature. He walked past her to the pilot's chair. He sat down heavily. His hands were steady on the controls, though his body screamed with fatigue. Elara sat beside him in the co-pilot's seat. She watched his profile. The granite jaw, the steady eyes that had seen too much and yet refused to look away. "Ronin?" she asked quietly. "Yeah? Are we safe?" Ronin engaged the hyperdrive. The stars outside the viewport elongated into streaks of white fire, a tunnel of light leading them away from the dark. He looked at the monitor, checking the rear scopes. The space behind them was empty. He reached over and for the second time patted her head. It was awkward, heavy, but undeniably protective. It was the touch of a man who would stand between the world and its victims until his last breath. "For today, kid," he said. "For today, we're safe. Tomorrow, well, tomorrow is a problem for tomorrow." He leaned back, the leather of his chair creaking. He pulled his hat down over his eyes. "Wake me in 4 hours. And don't touch the radio, I like the quiet." Within seconds, his breathing leveled out. A soldier can sleep anywhere, anytime. Elara watched the stars. She wasn't trembling anymore. She looked at the old man sleeping beside her, a relic of a harder, crueler time. She realized then that sometimes the monsters aren't the ones you should be afraid of. Sometimes the monster is the one standing between you and the dark. And for the first time in her life, she felt pity for the dark. Because the dark had to face Ronin.